Hi, good afternoon for me, good morning for you. Really excited to be here recording for our arts and entrepreneurship class with Lana Irving. We just did this whole thing beforehand where I was like, I've known you for a couple weeks, but want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name properly. And then I totally paused because I got nervous, which is how it always goes. But I was about to tell a story about when I was in law school, and I had a professor who was really really and would go through the entire roster. And every time he said my name, he would say Rufin. And it was I put up with it 2 months or whatever. And finally it was one of those days where I was super hungover, and he said it, and I was like, it's Ruffin. When you want a muffin, you don't want a muffin, do you?
No, I want a muffin though.
Yeah, I totally lost it on it. My friends who are still my friends, they remember that all the time, and we'll talk and what's up, Rufin?
I'm gonna start calling you that now.
Yeah, no, it'll totally be a thing. But yeah, how are you? So you're in New Zealand.
That's right. Yes, how am I? Well, it's tomorrow, and it's morning, and it's almost summer, so pretty much upside down from where you are.
Yeah. Well, in New Mexico, it's not quite fall yet. Yeah. Well, nice. Super stoked to talk to you. You'll be one of the first videos that my classes see, I believe, if I actually follow the syllabus this year. And I'm super excited because, with my background at Fractured Atlas, I know fiscal sponsorship really well. And I love when people innovate on things that I actually have paid attention to and a bit nerdy about. And the work that you're doing with Open Collective has totally blown my mind. And so I'm really just excited to spend some time allowing, the class to really think deeply about how fiscal sponsorship can be a tool for their creative growth, for starting organizations, for really organizing themselves, and being a sort of a tool to shift the leverage in terms of philanthropic capital and pooling resources. So that's my intro. But I guess my first basic question is tell us a little bit about your path to Open Collective. How did you fall into this? Was this your life plan to sort of build this awesome dope ass platform, or did it sort of happen to you?
Definitely did not have a plan. So I will just start by saying that. Yeah, when I was younger, I was interested in lots of different things and had no idea what the path would look like. So I was born and raised in the US, and I went to college in Chicago, and I studied Asian studies and learned Japanese and studied fine art as well. And I didn't, those are not necessarily vocational career choices. So I didn't know what I was going to do. After college, I got a job in Japan as a translator. And I just was kind of in this mode of exploring and trying to figure myself out, as I think a lot of people are in their 20s. And I basically spent a lot of years learning what I didn't want to do, which was very useful. I don't regret it. So working for local government in Japan, I moved to Europe. I lived in London and worked in the finance sector and kind of in the dark heart of capitalism and corporate. And I'm like, okay, that one is definitely not for me. And I kind of quit and did this really kind of stereotypical, oh, I'm going to go spend some time in Spain, or I went to India and I trained as a yoga teacher. And, those things were amazing, but I still felt I don't know. I had this feeling inside me that I wanted to really make a difference and work for positive change on a systemic level, and that everything I had tried so far was just kind of either working against that or kind of just in this really tiny bubble that wasn't going to make a big difference. And then I moved to New Zealand, and I basically intersected with the social enterprise sector here. I've always been a bit of a nerd, into computers, and also a nerd about, I guess, how groups work, how groups of humans talk to each other and collaborate. And it was then when I moved to New Zealand that I really felt all these different kind of threads in my life came together. And I was able to put my different skills and interests to work in something that made sense. So ended up kind of founding a series of startups focused on making tools, open source software tools for collaboration. And I'm also, very fascinated with the idea of money and tools for empowering community with money. So all of us started coming together, and did a couple of startups, learned a lot in that whole experience, and then ended up finding Open Collective, and that was like, oh my God, it's all the things that I'm most nerdy about in one project. And so I just felt like, so now I've been doing that for about 5 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I actually, and you're part of Inspiral Network, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's really relevant to sort of that, going deep with that part of your path. Because I think I'm inspired by that work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was an amazing experience being part of Inspiral. So Inspiral is a network of, I guess you could call it a network of social entrepreneurs, but no word really fits. It's kind of a network of people who have a mindset of, I want to use my working hours to make a difference in this world. I want to try experiments and do things in new ways, and kind of throw out the old ideas of what a company is or what a job is, and kind of really explore what could be different there. And so when I moved to New Zealand, and here in Wellington, Inspiral had just kind of started. At that time, it was basically a freelancers collective of computer programmers. And there was about probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 10 people involved. And it basically started because computer programmers can get pretty highly paid work, and there's lots of work around for them. And so they were able to basically, by banding together, get everybody enough work so they could pay their rent and live, and then spend a lot of their time working on social impact projects. So I got involved and kind of, jumped right into the middle of it, and then ended up kind of helping to grow it from there. Instead of just a computer programming freelancer collective, basically grew it into a network of companies and people, and it grew to about 300 people, people around the world, with lots of different companies. So some of them were tech focused, there were designers and technologists, but then also like accountants and lawyers and all kinds of different consulting and facilitators and all this stuff. But we really kind of felt aligned on the mission driven work that we were doing, and then just really hardcore, I guess, experimenting with, okay, you have 300 people, you want them all to make decisions together, like how does that work in practice? And kind of like joined up at that time. The Occupy movement was in full swing. We sort of intersected with that, and a lot of Occupy people got involved, and we ended up making this tool called Lumio, which is for collaborative decision making. And it was really a coming together of the kind of collective decision making that we're trying to do at Occupy, which is consensus decision making, and the kind of consensus decision making we're trying to do at Inspiral, which is like, how do we run this sort of semi-professional network together as a co-op, more or less. And then we developed this software tool to help with collaborative decision making. Similarly, we started doing participatory budgeting, because that's a big question. If you're trying to be a true collective, you have to figure out, well, how do we decide what to spend money on? So we created a tool called Co-Budget for participatory budgeting, which is kind of like internal crowdfunding in a way, using shared resources. And so this, again, is speaking to kind of my nerdiness on this specific, like, I'm a facilitator and I like software, and I really love figuring out, how can we get engagement and true shared power and shared information and transparency? And so all these tools were kind of in pursuit of that. That kind of led me, I guess, to developing these interests and skills. And, to be perfectly frank, after about 7 years of doing that in a pretty hardcore way, I think I burned out. It's really exhausting. Doing, like, startups are exhausting. Social impact work is exhausting. Trying to do things which are just new in the world and creative and innovative is exhausting. Deep relationship with people, diverse people, can be, it's the most wonderful thing, and it's exhausting. So like I tended, at that time especially, I tended to do things either like not at all or way too much. And I think I hadn't quite got that balance. So I was on the way too much side and burned out a bit. And then I swung way onto the, like, I'm taking a break from everything. And, like, booked a house in the middle of the woods for 2 weeks with no internet access. And anyway, since then, I kind of like slowly came back into working on social impact startup technology, but in, I hope, a more sustainable way. But yeah, I learned so much at that time in Inspiral, and grew up a lot, I think. Yeah.
Well, whenever you mentioned Lumio, and that was one of the first potential projects I ever met at Fractured Atlas, which is just like I feel like you and I were going to meet eventually. Like, just the world had it destined. But I think it was like maybe my second day in the office at Fractured Atlas, and some folks had come in to meet and see if fiscal sponsorship was the right thing for them with Lumio. I don't know if I've told you that.
Awesome.
Have I told you that?
I don't think we've talked about that. Yeah, we were trying. Lumio is a funny one because it was such a strange beast. It was like, we had like 12 co-founders, and we were all really like far on one, like the idealistic side of the spectrum of like, we don't want to do things the traditional startup way. We were a worker-owned cooperative, and then that created like VC investors do not know how to interact with the worker-owned cooperative.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a lot about that in this class for sure.
Yes. So anyway, we had to figure everything out, and we were just really like, talking to lots of people about, well, could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be fiscal sponsorship? Could it be, crowdfunding? All that.
Yeah. And then you also brought up Occupy. Is this year the 10-year anniversary of Occupy? Or is it, or was it
probably something like that? It's 2011 to 2012.
Yeah,
I think,
right. Like I feel like we were, gosh, I was just thinking about where I was, because I was living in Washington, D.C. and just got my first nonprofit job. I had been a lobbyist for a while, and my office was on the second floor overlooking McPherson Square, which was where everybody camped out. And I'll never forget it. Wow. It was super loud all the time, but it felt like something was building. Yeah. Oh man, I feel like I need to sort of read what people are, how are people reflecting on that movement? And like, I mean, this might be a question. Do you think long tail like Occupy had a big impact on how we talk about wealth and equity? I know we're like far. I didn't think I was going to ask you that question, but here we are having a conversation.
I hope so. I mean, I had a funny experience when Occupy came up, because like I was like raised in California by hippies, and like at that time I'd been like on Burning Man, and like I lived in a cooperative house, and like we were really hardcore into consensus decision making and stuff. I lived there during my university years, and so it was like almost like a whole lot more of the world discovering this way of being that was very familiar to me and like made a lot of sense to me already, and I kind of knew some of the pros and cons of. So it was, I remember, so the people who ended up being the co-founders of Lumia with me, we met because they were hardcore in Occupy. They were like down the road at City Hall, camped on City Hall's front lawn during Occupy, and came over because they're like, oh, we heard about Inspirals, like kind of values aligned, and they know a lot about technology. We need to use technology. And I just remember sitting in the room with these activists who ended up becoming good friends and co-founders of mine, and just being like, you seem really tired. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Like, are you, and the answer was no. They were completely overstretched, and like, taking calls from media and trying to solve people's drama and trying to do consensus decision making. And just like, I understood where they were because I had very much been there. And at the same time, like Occupy was, I think, really good about saying, well, we don't have a plan. We are a pluralistic movement. We are pointing out some important things. But to me, what was really amazing about Occupy was it gave many, many, many more people that experience, and essentially radicalized, I think, a lot of people who hadn't had the chance to have those experiences that I did of like sitting in circles and doing real consensus and doing real, just the work that's involved in creating a cooperative society, the different paradigm. And yeah, the movement, it went out of the news after a while, but all of those people, their lives were changed, and they're still out there doing amazing things which have been influenced by that. So I really think it did have quite a big impact, along other, there've been a lot of movements that you could say are similar, like in different ways, like Arab Spring did it in a different way, and all these social movements around the world. But I think that we're just going to have to keep doing that over and over and over again until the world changes.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so provocative, because I think we might be it's a quieter movement happening around solidarity economies and around collectivity. It looks very different from Occupy, but I do think some of the conversations that we're having, both at like the sort of small grassroots level, sort of the work that you're doing, providing infrastructure for organizations that already know they want to go that way. It's happening, over on that side of the spectrum. And it's also happening with like big institutions with our colleague Caroline's work with Art.coop. Oh yeah, I feel like I need to do some reading, and then I'm probably gonna be slacking you a whole bunch of stuff, being like, this was happening to Occupy. Oh, and there's my desktop going off again.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, so back to Open Collective. Can you tell us a little bit more about OC? It's a constellation of entities that are sort of working in tandem. But can you sort of walk us through, what Open Collective is?
Sure. So if you go to opencollective.com and look at it, I think what it appears like on the surface level is basically a crowdfunding platform. It looks a little bit like that. It's people can put up a page and say, you can support us and give us money, sign up $5 a month or give us $100 or whatever it is. So that is one level that it functions on, but there's more to it. So Open Collective is a software platform that enables crowdfunding, but it's also a tool for fiscal sponsorship. And so what that means is an entity, this is, well, it could be a person, but usually an incorporated entity that has a bank account and basically has a legal existence that the world out there can recognize, can use Open Collective to basically pitch up an umbrella, and then under that umbrella, lots of unincorporated projects can live basically under their umbrella. And it means that they can have, like, that umbrella entity has a bank account and it has an accountant and all these things, and provides that infrastructure. And then each of the projects under the umbrella doesn't have to set that up for themselves. So this is essentially what fiscal sponsorship is about. And Open Collective is a software platform that basically automates a lot of the admin around managing that whole setup. It makes it all transparent. So this is one of the other things that, if you look at Open Collective and are thinking about, well, what's different? What is different about Open Collective from, say, a Kickstarter or Patreon or something that it might look a bit like? One of the first things you'll notice is the transparency. So you can see where all the money comes from, and you can see what all the money is spent on. So if you give to a campaign, it's not just like throwing money into a black box and then it disappears. It's more of an invitation for ongoing engagement and also some accountability back to that wider community and that trust building. And the other thing that's different is it is designed for ongoing groups, not a sort of a one-off 30-day campaign and you build up this whole community of support and then it disappears. It's much more for ongoing groups, and it's for collaborative groups. So it's designed from the ground up for collectives, things which are not owned by one person or a few people, and that are actually maybe exist between people or exist between organizations. And that just has created, I think, a lot of really different assumptions about how software should be designed, and also what's possible on the platform. So what it's grown into is, as you said, an international network of these kind of umbrella organizations. We call them fiscal hosts because they're sort of like hosting these different projects under their umbrella, and they each have a different focus. So, for example, Open Collective Foundation, it's a US-based 501c3. It's helping groups who want to go for funding that requires a 501c3, or want to give those tax deductions, or just as a really good fit for the mission around solidarity economy. There's another US nonprofit that's focused on open source software projects. And then we have, say, there's one in Europe that's focused on climate action groups. I started one here in New Zealand that's, optimized for the New Zealand environment. And there's some fiscal hosts are, for example, a host of a whole network of meetups, and then each meetup gets its own page and can do its own fundraising. And it basically allows you to not only raise money, but also manage spending it, distributing it out to the people who might be contributing to your project in a really flexible way. Because of the software, we can handle lots of transactions coming in, lots of transactions going out without driving everybody absolutely insane. And yeah, it allows somebody who is a community organizer or a creator or a volunteer to set up a group without having to take on a huge amount of liability and admin and bureaucracy. And it's a big, heavy lift to be like, okay, yeah, right, we're going to hire a lawyer and hire an accountant and incorporate and get registered as a 501c3. Like, that's massive. And basically, it just kills me to think about amazing community activists and creators and all kinds of people wasting their time doing paperwork. I love paperwork. I'm into it. I love spreadsheets. I actually really enjoy filling out my tax forms. I want to do that for them so that they can be out in community doing the stuff that I want to do.
Yeah, we did at Fraction Atlas, we did a fair amount of sort of research into when you do the analysis of what's the point at which you should probably become a C3 in these states. And it's something you're doing $1 million a year over 3 years in terms of, charitable donations. And such a small percentage of organizations reach that level. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to start a nonprofit here when you have fiscal sponsors as a viable alternative.
Yeah, I was talking to social impact commons. They basically are like a peak body of, not really peak body, they support fiscal sponsor organizations basically. And they've done similar research and they say actually not until your budget's like $5 or $10 million a year is it really worth it to, yeah. I found that really interesting. I was surprised, but that's, you know, what they found looking at lots of different fiscal sponsors. You know, it's not just the costs, like the costs are real, like lawyers and accountants are really expensive, and auditors, oh my God.
So yeah.
Time to go and audit.
Yeah.
But it's people's time and energy. And it's also like, this is something I found, like another thing that I think about a lot is like how does leadership work in non-hierarchical groups and networks? And a big component of that is diversity, and that leadership looks really different in different people, and you need all these diverse kinds of leadership coming together. And I guess one really practical instantiation of that is if you're forcing somebody to do stuff that they hate and that just drains their energy and that is not their thing and taking them away from what was driving their passion, you know, to do this thing in the first place, that's a terrible use of everyone's energy. Yeah, we need to specialize a bit and share, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also think it's just, you know, why swim upstream when you don't have to? You know, for some people, spreadsheets and forms and everything feels like you're smooth sailing on the river. But for a lot of us, it feels like we are battling in whitewater upriver. And I think a lot about the opportunity costs. A number of people who reach out to me who are in over their head, you know, who, you know, haven't filed a 990, haven't, you know, sort of are having a hard time budgeting. They feel like they're so bogged down with admin costs or board meetings. You know, they start this board and now they have to manage a board, and, you know, it's a lot. And I think about sort of container organizations like Open Collective, like Fractured House, to make it really easy for somebody to plug and play, are so vital for, like, you know, for movement building and for like the ongoing success of a vibrant nonprofit sector. And, you know, we'll have some pretty intense debates over, you know, our time together in these courses about the viability and the practicality of having a nonprofit sector in the United States. Like, hasn't really changed anything over the last 60 years. You know, how successful, how impactful are we, which I think are viable, are really important questions to sort of dig into. But I mean, it's the necessity of having organizations make it easy for people to do the thing that they're going to do. It's just so important. I'm curious about like ideal use cases, like when you're thinking about like the perfect sweet spot for a collective or an organization to sort of join up with Open Collective, like what does that look like? Who would those people be?
The groups that have found a really natural affinity with Open Collective, I think they fall into a few different categories, but I think they have a lot in common. So I mentioned meetups. That's an example of a group where it's like, it's a thing that exists, but nobody really owns it. And the people involved might change over time. And if somebody did take ownership of it, it would be weird or, you know, not right for what they're trying to be. And you can see that same kind of pattern. Open source software projects are very similar. They are a thing which is like an open collaboration that's out there in the world. And for somebody to own it or for it to live inside a for-profit company or something, it would actually kind of destroy something special about it. And so that's one thing. Mutual aid groups are a huge one for Open Collective Foundation that have really found an affinity with how we work. And that's a similar thing. They are like groups of citizens coming together, and it might ebb and flow how much a given individual is involved, but this thing persists in the community. So Open Collective is designed so that it can be a group of people who manage it, a large group or a small group, and they can change over time. And that group can enable a much wider community of supporters to be involved. So I think any people who fit that kind of shape, I think works really well. Also, anytime that somebody gets into a situation where they're like, I started this thing and it kind of started snowballing, and now we're supposed to, we would qualify for this grant. It's a really great fit for us, but wait, now they want to know where to send the money. If I put this money in my bank account, I have to pay income tax on it. And then suddenly it just crystallizes for them that this is a problem space. So these are pain points. In that moment, somebody will instantly understand the benefit of joining Open Collective for sure. But what we found in recent years is that actually quite large projects that are very substantial still can be a really good fit. And a lot of them are people who, they're just really clear that like, no, I'm not in this to like manage a nonprofit entity. I'm in this to do the thing that we're trying to do in the world. Or it can be something like, we have a lot of really amazing partnerships with major funders. So on the open source software side, that's a lot of people in the more tech focused world, both for-profit and like philanthropic, foundations. They need something quite formal to interact with, like just the really like, I don't want you to have to think too much about this, but the procurement systems of like Google and Facebook. Oh my God, you don't even want to know.
I'm in Facebook procurement hell right now. Yeah. Okay. Oh God, I totally.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So basically, we've set up these relationships. We're in their procurement systems, and then we like sometimes we just get an email like, "Hey, this is so and so from Google. We've decided to give another $500,000 to open source projects." Like, and because the channel's already there, they just press a button and it's easy.
Oh yeah.
So even on the large scale, it can be really useful, both for, like actually from the funder side as well, to work with us because we make their life a lot easier. We've had situations where a funder wants to distribute a whole lot of grants to lots of different people. That's a nightmare for them to process through their like account systems and stuff. They can do one grant to us, and then it's easy for us to distribute it to lots of people. So these are some of the examples. Also things where it's a thing that's sitting between organizations and kind of needs to live in like a neutral and transparent space. Coalitions. We have several like large like mutual aid groups coming together. Like we've got in Chicago right now, several of them joining together to rent a warehouse space. They can put a fund together that they can all see and manage without it being in any one of their, one of their domains. We see that a lot here in New Zealand. We've had a good response from the Maori Indigenous community here, and that's because a lot of times they're organized sort of like families will have an association with a marae, which is like a meeting place, and then several marae will want to come together and do something, and them keeping the money in their bank account of any one of those marae would be like damaging to the whole thing. And so for them being able to have a neutral space where they can put money and all see it and use it is really valuable. So that's another time that it comes up.
Yeah, no, that's such a helpful description of like all of the different, like you just gave like 14 use cases. I asked for one. You just gave so many.
I'm not good at the like marketing headline,
No, but I think that's like such a beautiful like, and some of the use cases were ones where like, I have a meetup that is likely to fall in my lap. I'm trying to put it off, but like Albuquerque's VR meetup, like it's probably at some point going to end up with me. And part of my issue is like, I actually don't know how to manage this thing without growing it. And I don't want to grow another entity on my own necessarily. So it's just my brain goes to growth and sustainability.
There are some people who are magnets for things, and like, if they touch them, they start to grow, and you're like, oh no, I don't need another project right now.
Yeah.
But if you make it an open collective, one cool thing that I've seen is like, there's a lot of people out there who would be a bit intimidated. Like if you said, hey, do you want to take over leadership of this entire meetup? They'd be like, oh no. But if you're like, hey, I'm going to add 3 or 4 people as admins of this thing, and you can be involved with deciding how we spend the money, and then they can step in a way that's successful, and then what tends to happen is they'll grow their capacity and their confidence, and then a little bit down the track you can kind of back away slowly, and the thing doesn't have to implode. Like I'm like that too. I tend to touch things and grow them, and then it becomes a whole thing. But this is what we've seen a lot as well with them. We've got a really cool thing starting up in Australia, which is like a whole network of basically youth entrepreneurship and stuff like that. And I think young people is a really great example because they have really amazing capacity for, everything about running a project, when deciding what's important, putting the word out, all this kind of stuff. But I think throwing it all at them at once, getting young people to like, oh, now you have an entity, now you have to deal with the tax agency, and if you fuck it up, you're going to go to jail. Oh, sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear. But
listen, I hope we're allowed to swear, because Lord knows these people who are listening are going to hear so much from me over the course of this next 8 weeks. Good.
Okay, we're warming them up.
Yeah.
Anyway, that could be a heavy situation, but if you invite them into a thing, it's like, okay, we'll take care of the kind of outer bounds of compliance, but really leave you in control of everything about the project it's within that. It can be a massive capacity and confidence building thing, and then the next time they will have the confidence to start their own company if that's what they want to do.
Yeah. And I mean, in some ways, like the way that we require, there's so many charitable youth things that spin up that should probably raise money, but people default to GoFundMe because you don't have to have an entity to do that. And it's hard for kids to set up a bank account. So, I mean, again, there are just so many again, so many use cases. And by the way, that was good marketing. Like a little bit of like, hey, just ease your way in. No big deal. Just tell us how we should spend this money. Totally, you're totally a marketer on inside. What did you think would be really hard about getting Open Collective going that was easier than it, like it actually turned out to be easier than you thought it would be?
Yeah, like, well, as I alluded to, I don't think like marketing is my strong suit. So sometimes I was worried, like, how do we, I find it hard to tell the story in a really simple, catchy way because there's a bit of complexity to it. And so that was a worry of mine. You know, I think this is a really cool thing, but how do we get it out there? How do we explain to people what it is? And then what ended up happening is it sort of just caught on in some subcultures. And what we see is it just goes like through word of mouth and starts growing. And then we ended up having the opposite problem, which was like really good, but still a problem where it was like growing really, really fast. And we were running to keep up with it. And, you know, having to, you know, build the plane while flying the plane kind of feeling, which is great. This is what you want. If you do a startup, you want it to grow and thrive, but, you know, there's a lot that needs to be done. So that can get stressful.
Yeah. And conversely, what was harder than you thought it would be? What was like the surprise?
Well, let's see. It's really, really normal stuff for a startup. It took us a long time to figure out the right pricing model. You know, it was a painful process iterating on that and having to change it several times and explain it to everyone and, you know, get the numbers going in the right direction. We had, you know, a very typical story of 2 of the 3 original co-founders ended up moving on, both for their own reasons and in their own way. And that's always like, co-founder relationships are basically like, you know, it's like a marriage and then it's like a whole separation process. And the relationships there are good and it wasn't horrible or anything like that, but it's always a thing. And it took us a few years, I think, to get through all of that, kind of figuring out who we should be, what shape this organization should be, the real model to get it all to click together. And then it was only about a year, maybe 2 years ago that we felt really clear and confident with all that. And we're like, right, we're ready to scale this thing. And luckily that was at the same time as a lot of stuff was like getting traction and growing. So yeah, it's working. But there are, you know, I've done several startups now and that's always the story, you know, it's always it asks a lot of you personally, the whole startup journey and intellectually and like figuring out how you fit into the world and, you know, really technical stuff like what's the right capitalization model and blah, blah, blah. And then also like really interpersonal, you know, human stuff.
Yeah. And you know, the interpersonal human stuff is always the stuff that I find not the hardest, but it's like, you know, you can predict what tech's going to do. I mean, outside of, you know, Facebook going down this week, like you can predict what tech, you can sort of predict that. Humans are just the most unpredictable aspect of building things. But I mean, you've got an awesome team, and I'm curious. I mean, like, so we have so much overlap again, as I said earlier, like, you know, we've got Caroline, Nathan, your colleague Nathan and I work together at Fractured Atlas. You've managed to really, for an early stage organization, you've managed to just recruit some really competent people. Can you tell us about that process of, you know, identifying and bringing people on board? You sort of have an interesting like pilot, let's get to know each other sort of ethos around bringing people to the team, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly like I wake up in the morning these days and I just have this sense of gratitude and relief at the team that we've managed to put together, because that's everything when you're building something. And yeah, it's taken some time. Like we had to do a lot of work to figure out, you know, to gain clarity of like, what are we actually here to do? And then therefore to understand what kind of people we need to be working with. And yeah, one of the cool things about Open Collective is its kind of decentralized, fluid nature. Like it's a tool for enabling fluid, dynamic, collective ways of working. So it's really natural that we would internally be shaped like that. So we're like truly a collective, or I would say like a cloud of interrelated collectives in terms of what Open Collective is like on the inside. And that's allowed us to do things like, you know, work with someone on like a project basis or do a little consulting and get to know each other and see if that genuine fit is there. I think, you know, really traditional hiring processes haven't worked out as well for us because yeah, there's some things you just can't know about someone based on an interview. And, you know, there's a flip side to that, which is that not everybody has the luxury and the privilege of being able to just, help us work on a flexible group of, projects, whatever.
Yeah.
Like not everybody's in that position. We're now that we're a little bit bigger, we're being more serious about, we need to give people stability and health insurance. And, we're really conscious of all of that stuff. But, when we were small and growing, we couldn't get there straight away. So yeah, I think it's really weird, but pretty much the whole team has found us and hired themselves. And this is what I found at Inspiral as well, and several other projects, that if you're deeply genuine about what you're doing, and that means that you're stacking up the authenticity of what you're doing, what your business is about, how the technology is built, what your actual values are, what your actual mission is. If those things are all in genuine alignment, it tends to turn into this beacon, which sort of attracts people who are nerds about exactly the right thing. That absolutely happens. And so like with Caroline, for example, who joined the team, like I guess it was about 6 months ago. She did this amazing, co-wrote this amazing report, Art.coop, which is about more the creative culture bearers and creators space. And I don't remember how I got linked up to that, but I read that and I was like, oh my God, like we need to align behind this word called solidarity. We need to understand how sponsorship fits into this bigger story. We need to understand that report is a lot about how funding should work in that world. And so we need to understand that as well. So anyway, I just wrote a fangirl email to Caroline being like, hey, I read your report. Like, I really loved it. And then she wrote back like, oh, wow, yeah, more of your work as well. And then we had a call and it was just like, oh.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't quite believe it. I was like, no, this can't just work out this way. But then, yeah, totally. We thought we would just work on a small project together, but then it was totally like, no, actually what's going to happen is you're going to take all your projects that you're already working on and we're going to support you with them, bring them under our umbrella and go crazy. And that's kind of happened with a few people. Like, I think when I connected with you, it was really similar. I was just like, I don't even know what's going to come out of this, but I just know it's going to be awesome and that we should invest in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that comfort with ambiguity and sort of just letting things develop naturally. I have to tell you, the older I get, the more I hate hiring people through a traditional hiring process. Like, I'm supposed to know you after talking to you for 2.5 hours and figuring out if I want to spend more time with you than I do with my family. Okay. Like, it's just the weirdest process. And I really think that y'all are onto something in terms of like, how do you build a team that's moving in lockstep and sort of, I believe if you have shared values, you can do anything together. Like, if you can just ground on that. And I mean, the flip side is like that privilege piece, which you also raised, which is like, not everyone's fortunate enough to be able to sort of say like, I'm only going to do stuff that I care deeply about. And I'm only going to dedicate more than 40 hours a week to thinking about it. And that's not for everybody, but I have been, having worked in so many different organizations, I'm super impressed with like the quality and dedication of the team. And conversely, like the engagement, like, so one unique thing about Open Collective is they've got users in a shared Slack channel with staff in a way that like I've never seen before. It feels highly vulnerable and super direct in terms of feedback, feature requests, all that stuff. And that level of transparency and like shared community building in an organization where the line between almost worker and user is a little bit blurred. It feels a little blurry to me. I think is really special.
I mean, it's also because our thing is getting, like, our whole thing is getting people paid. Like, their work is our work. Like, our platform enables their work and their work enables our platform. So it seems like a really natural kind of thing. And like, yeah, I think values alignment is part of it. The transparency thing that we started with is an important factor. I think there are also really important structural factors that make that possible. Like I mentioned, capitalization model. Like, we are currently like in the black. We're making enough money to operate our basic operations at the different levels of the Open Collective network. That creates this spaciousness that would not be possible. I mean, this is the first startup I've done where it's ever gotten to that stage, so it feels really different. But like even earlier than that, like so Open Collective raised money at the beginning, as you do when you're starting a startup and trying to scale it. But they were very, very picky about the investment that they took. and most companies don't have the luxury of taking really values-aligned impact investment that they don't cede any control and allows the actual mission to be at the center in a very deeply genuine way. So we don't have any dark incentives that are trying to get us to exploit users, that are trying to get us to scale beyond where we actually need to be. All these pressures that a lot of startups, if you take VC, like VCs, in a VC's mind, it's like it's either 1000x or it's zero, and they literally don't care about anything in the middle. And I've talked to a lot of startup founders who took the VC but in their hearts are like a values driven person, and it's very hard. It's very, very hard. So we had that privilege as well with Open Collective about the type of investment we could access, and then we didn't raise more money than we needed, so we have actually now a lot of control, and that's what's leaving the possibility we're looking into doing an exit to community, in terms of the future of Open Collective, and that would not have been possible if the capitalization structure and the way the company was set up was different.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And I mean, on that customer and the user thing, as you were talking, I was thinking about more marketing, which is like Open Collective might be the only organization I know who doesn't like run in fear from its users. Like as we're brainstorming marketing approaches, like I can totally see like customer service running, an animation of customer service folks running screaming down the street. But like, and that's the truth, because folks have a hard time, or many startups have a hard time figuring out what their value proposition is and aligning that with their user base, or they start something before they know what their users actually need because they just want to raise money. Yeah, I mean, that's so fascinating. I think one of my last questions for you, because I know we're almost at time, can you tell us more about Exit Community? We might end up talking to Danny or Nathan at some point during this course, but I'd love to just to get your thoughts on what Exit Community is and why it really works for you.
Yeah, well, one of the first times, I think the first time I saw your face was when you were in the Exit to Community explainer video. So you have.
Oh yeah, I narrated that thing. I can't believe they used my voice.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. Yeah, so exit to community is just basically a different way to think about a startup exit. So the traditional way that startups are funded and dealt with is you have an idea, you're starting something at the very early stage, you get venture capital investment, and that allows you to grow it, and then you have an exit. And that's where you're selling the company. And that enables the people who put investment in at the beginning to basically get their investment back, hopefully multiplied by however much that's their goal. And also, means a payout for the founders or the early employees. And I think that's really in tension with how a lot of people actually want to do companies and business. Like a lot of people don't start something with the intention of selling it and exiting it. Like maybe it has a perpetual purpose or, something like that. And it's not necessarily focused on that scaling and exit model. And also when you grow something, the community around it, your community of users and your employees and the community that you're serving, they're all stakeholders as well, and they're really left out, I would say, in that traditional exit framework. So exit to community is about doing your exit to your community, meaning you essentially sell yourself to your wider community of stakeholders, because it actually is important to do an exit moment in a startup, especially if you have values-aligned investors, because what you want
Definitely.
is we build a successful project, we give our investors their money back plus more, and they're going to turn around and invest it in the next generation of important ideas and things that need to happen. So we want that. So yeah, I think I'm also very fascinated by ownership as a concept. Obviously, I've started a few worker-owned cooperatives. I think it's incredibly powerful to have shared ownership of a thing. And especially if you scale up the number of owners, it really changes, you have to figure out shared power and shared information and all this stuff. So I'm really interested in that. So anyway, Open Collective hasn't figured out exactly what its exit community might look like. We're in a kind of research phase, but it will be around, essentially the platform will be owned and governed by, it could be the coalition of all the different fiscal hosts, these kind of umbrella organizations that use the platform. It could go even broader in terms of all the collectives and all the individuals in those collectives. I don't know exactly what the right model is going to be, but it will be the mission will be at the center of it. There are people who have done exits to community using a perpetual purpose trust, which is basically, it's like a legal entity owns the thing and the legal entity is set up that has to put the mission at the center. That's one way to go about it. Yeah, there's like more cooperative based ways to do it, but I just think it's a really values aligned version of an exit for us.
Yeah, the thing I love about exit community is just what a departure it is from imagining how we traditionally imagine what's possible. It's really frustrating how not creative we are so often. And partially it's just like we don't expose folks at that pivotal point where they're thinking about making these decisions to everything that's possible. We're taught set up a Delaware LLC or Delaware C Corp. And then you sort of march straight through seed, pre-seed, seed, Series A, and and some people just follow that path. But yeah, I love how you're constantly testing what people tell you you're supposed to do. I think that level of like contrarianism is so necessary.
But also to look at like who benefits from that traditional system. It's another version of a tiny elite at the top gets all the money and the benefits. 999 people get chewed up and spit out, and then one gets a huge payout, and a control sits with a very small number of people. And that's like a reference to or a microcosm of the bigger social society, worldview society. Are we building a society where there's an elite at the top and there's a hierarchy of humans, or are we building a society where it's inclusive and we all share and we build things together and we share the benefits of what we build? I think that's like so much of, I think, what the decisions we make and the things we learn kind of comes down to that distinction of what kind of world are we actually trying to build. And I find it really useful to take that thinking through and be like, oh, okay, well, let's see if we build a one company structured in the way that we think society should be like. This is a way for us to practice and explore these ideas and understand how the different facets fit together. And then through that, we could learn kind of what we were talking about Occupy at the beginning, where it's like, okay, we have this experience of sitting in a circle, and then you can internalize that and really live it. And then that can start to spread, I think, in a really powerful way.
Yeah. Oh, that's so powerful. And I think we should just end there, where it's not going to get any better than that. I think it's, I'm so glad I got to talk to you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm also really excited about, what all the people listening can do and what the future organizations and generations are going to take us somewhere really amazing and exciting with these starting places that we have.
Yeah. And just so we have it at the end, what's the easiest way for folks to find Open Collective on Twitter, website? Give us all that stuff. I'll edit this video so it pops up when it shows, but give us the verbal.
Okay, well, opencollective.com is the main website. You can go there, and if you contact through there, you put my name and you'll reach me. We're a pretty small team, so we're humans who will respond. You can join our Slack. If you go slack.opencollective.com, anyone is welcome to join our Slack. Open Collective Foundation, which is the US nonprofit fiscal host that we have. We're just opencollective.foundation, so that's pretty easy as well. On Twitter, we are OpenCollect @OpenCollect, and we do tweet. We started a whole doing much more social media. I know we have an Insta and Facebook and stuff now, but I don't have them ready to rattle off. But we are, as you say, genuinely a very open community, and we would really welcome anyone who wants to come tell us what you're thinking and how can we help you, or if you have any questions, we're here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And we'll talk soon.